The socialising in isolation part of InGAME International came around during the height of the COVID pandemic. And the aim there was to look at how video gaming technology might be able to help people communicate, keep in touch and enhance their well-being while they can't be together. So it was about playing together instead of being together. So we set out to create a video game where people could play together across the regions of UK and China. Quite quickly we discovered that actually, due to regulations in China, it isn't actually possible to cross those boundaries in a legal way. So the Chinese market is self-contained.
But even down to things like how do you use servers? In China, for instance, the access is different, down to which tools can be used and shared, which files can be exchanged. These kind of fundamental issues are stark. And that's before you get to the more pressing challenges when it comes to how games are even released commercially in China. Is very different to, say, a market like the UK, where you can effectively launch as many products as you want into the market, provided you have the resources to do so, and the licensing is fairly well understood for that. Whereas in China, the licensing is much more tightly controlled. Only so many licenses are issued every year, and you do need to work with the Chinese publisher if you even want to begin down that road.
Typically, video games that are made for one market are made with that market only in mind, and then once they're finished, and maybe sometimes even released, then they're localized for another market, and they may be localized, purely just through language. That's what happens across all of Europe, for example, or they may be localized in other ways. And typically in China, there needs to be quite significant localization, not just of language, but also of content to suit the appeal, the tastes of that market, and also the regulations. But what we tried to do with this project, working with our partners, Pocket Size Hands, was to embed cultural development in throughout the process. So we designed throughout thinking about what appeals to Chinese audiences and what appeals to UK and Western audiences, so that the only thing that we would have to change between the two versions of the game would be the language.
We had no one internally from a Pocket Size Hands point of view that was from China. So there was a lot of unknowns. The research was extremely important. The dating culture between China and the UK was really different, and if it wasn't from that research, we probably would have had a lot of biases. So having people that knew what the culture was like, but also people that could help us find the data that we're needing, was vital.
We engaged with users to gather feedback. So we had online calls with groups of players from China and with the UK to ask them for feedback on the trailer for the video game, the visual style of the characters in the world, the setting, all these sorts of different ideas to check that they might have appeal. And we used that sample to help us then shape how we move forward.
From a design perspective, it opens up a huge range of challenges. For us living in and being part of a Western market, it's really easy for us to bring our approach to games and our approach to making games. So what we did and how we overcome that as well is that we started looking at the Eastern market first and diving into that and figuring out what worked, what similarities were there that we could really latch onto and explore and expand more, that we felt would help cross that cultural divide as well.
One of the main sort of issues that we had with the characters was sort of reconciling the fact that there's a lot of censorship in China, especially around like LGBT characters. And we were making a dating game, and we as a team care really strongly about LGBT representation. So we were sort of trying to figure out, well, how do we do that? How do we make sure a game is true to what we believe in, but also could actually feasibly be released in China?
We put together a pitch deck, and we went to publishers that are experienced in selling games to the Chinese market. So that was an amazing experience. We got a lot of great feedback, and from that we knew we were on the right track.
So it's been fun, and it's been a whole learning process, and us trying to figure out the best way that we approach that as a studio.
Having done this project, I think the key advice I would give to game developers who are looking to access international markets, particularly markets like China, is just to know that you can speak to your sector organisations. An outcome of this project will be to try and, signpost where these places are and who you should be trying to speak to, and giving, encouragement to go ahead and do so.